It seems like whenever we talk about the Golden State Warriors, we talk about the phrase maximizing the end of Steph Curry's career. Do you think that the Warriors, even dating back to the Jimmy Butler trade, do you feel like that's what's happening here, is a maximization?
I think you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to what that actually means.
I'm asking the chef.
I know, and the idea of, like, you know, it's really unique what we've been able to do. For how long we've been able to do it. Like, we're relying on that expertise and IQ and knowledge now, you know, to overcome Father Time.
Jimmy Butler just made a move that has Michael Jordan questioning everything. The NBA legend who built an empire worth billions is now facing the biggest gamble of his career, and it's all because of one player he thought he could control. What started as a simple contract negotiation has exploded into a $2 billion standoff that could change the league forever. Butler didn't just turn his back on Jordan, he confirmed what everyone suspected but nobody dared to say out loud. And now, the entire basketball world is watching to see who blinks first. Look, we all know Michael Jordan as the greatest player to ever touch a basketball. 6 championships, 5 MVPs, a cultural icon who transcended the sport itself. But there's another side to MJ that doesn't get talked about enough. The businessman, the owner, the guy who's built a multi-billion-dollar empire and isn't afraid to make the cold, calculated decisions that protect his investment. And that's exactly where this story gets interesting. Because in early 2025, that empire is being threatened by one of the most fearless players in the league today. Jimmy Butler has never been the guy to back down from anyone. Not LeBron, not the media, and definitely not Michael Jordan. But what's happening right now goes beyond typical player-owner drama. This isn't just about money or playing time or even winning championships. This is about respect, power, and a $2 billion valuation that hangs in the balance. And Jimmy, he just lit the fuse on the whole thing. Let's rewind for a second and talk about how we got here. Michael Jordan didn't just retire from basketball and fade into the sunset. No, he saw an opportunity that most athletes miss, the chance to own the game instead of just playing it. When Jordan took majority ownership back in 2010, he wasn't just buying a team, he was buying into the future of the NBA, positioning himself as one of the few black majority owners in professional sports. That's legacy stuff. That's generational wealth. But here's the thing about being an owner. It changes you. The same competitive fire that made Jordan destroy opponents on the court, that same energy gets channeled into business decisions. And let me tell you, Jordan as an owner has a reputation. Former players have whispered about it for years. General managers have leaked stories. The man who demanded perfection from himself expects nothing less from everyone around him. And he's not exactly known for opening up the checkbook when players come asking for max contracts. By January 2025, Jordan's franchise had reached a valuation hovering around $2 billion. That's not just impressive, that's transformative wealth. But valuations are fragile things. They depend on winning, on star power, on keeping fans engaged and buying tickets. They depend on having players that people actually want to watch. Players like Jimmy Butler. Butler had become the centerpiece of Jordan's championship aspirations. This wasn't some role player or developmental project. This was a proven all-star, a guy who'd carried teams to the finals before, a player with the exact kind of mentality that should have made Jordan smile. Butler was MJ's type of guy, tough, uncompromising, willing to call out teammates who weren't giving maximum effort. On paper, it should have been a perfect match. But sometimes the things that make you similar are the exact things that make you clash. The tension started quietly, the way these things always do. Inside sources began whispering about contract extension talks that weren't going anywhere. Butler was entering the final stretch of his current deal, and he wanted security. Not just any security, he wanted to be paid like the franchise cornerstone he believed he was. And why wouldn't he? He had delivered everything that Jordan's organization had asked for. The effort was there, the production was there, the leadership was undeniable, but Jordan's front office wasn't moving. They were stalling, negotiating, throwing out numbers that Butler's camp found insulting. And here's where it gets messy. This wasn't just about the dollars. Butler felt disrespected. He felt like after everything he had given to the organization, after dragging them into playoff contention and putting fans in the seats, he was being treated like a replaceable piece rather than the foundation. By late 2024, Butler started dropping hints. Nothing too obvious at first. A cryptic Instagram post here, a carefully worded answer during a press conference there. "I just want to be somewhere I'm appreciated," he said after one game in December. The media picked up on it, but most people brushed it off as typical player posturing during contract negotiations. Nobody thought it would actually blow up. Except it did. Behind closed doors, the conversations were getting heated. Butler's agent was making it clear, if the organization wasn't going to show respect with a proper extension, then they needed to explore other options. And for Jordan, that was unacceptable. You don't dictate terms to Michael Jordan. You don't threaten to walk away from his organization. In his mind, players should be grateful for the opportunity to play for him, to learn from him, to be part of his legacy. But Jimmy Butler isn't built like that. He's never been grateful for opportunities. He's earned every single one through blood, sweat, and an unshakable belief in himself. So when Jordan's people came back with what they thought was a fair offer, Butler didn't just reject it, he made it clear he was done playing games. The whispers turned into rumors, the rumors turned into reports, and suddenly in early 2025, the basketball world was watching a standoff between two of the most stubborn, competitive individuals in the sport. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a routine press conference after a game in late January 2025. Butler had played well, put up his usual numbers, carried the team like he always does. A reporter asked him about his future with the organization, about whether he saw himself finishing his career there. Standard question, the kind of players usually deflect with generic answers about focusing on the present and loving their teammates. But Jimmy Butler isn't a generic player. "Look, I've given everything to this organization," Butler started, and you could hear the edge in his voice. "I've been loyal. I've been professional, but loyalty has to go both ways. And when you're being told your value isn't what you know it is, when you're being treated like you're lucky to be here instead of like you're the reason people are here, that tells you everything you need to know." The room went silent. Reporters stopped typing. Cameras kept rolling. Butler continued. "Look, I respect greatness. I respect what's been built. But I also respect myself. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like everything is fine when it's not. This business talks about loyalty until it's time to show it. Then it's all about numbers and risk and protecting investments. Well, I'm an investment too, and I know my worth." He didn't say Jordan's name. He didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. Twitter exploded. ESPN broke into regular programming. The debate started immediately. Was Butler out of line, or was he simply speaking truth that other players were too afraid to say out loud?
And we got some really good players, one in particular, number 30. And like I always say, you got a really good chance when 30, AKA Batman, is on the floor. So life is good.
You could close the chapter now. 4 rings, defensive players of the years, MVPs, finals MVPs. But how much do you talk about that fuel for 5?
That's all we talk about. Like getting that 5th ring, like what that would be like and what we need to do to get it done. That's the only focus.
Jordan's organization went into damage control mode. Anonymous sources close to the owner started leaking counter-narratives. Butler was being unreasonable. He was asking for too much money. He wasn't understanding the business side of things. But here's what made it worse. Other players started weighing in, and not all of them sided with the organization. Former teammates texted support to Butler. Current players across the league posted cryptic messages about knowing their worth. The Players Association released a statement about fair market value and respecting veteran contributions. This wasn't just about Jimmy and Jordan anymore. This had become a referendum on how the league treats its stars, especially when those stars are dealing with owner-operators who used to be players themselves. And that $2 billion valuation, it started looking shaky, Because franchise values aren't just about real estate and media deals. They're about having stars that people want to watch. If Butler walked, if this turned into an ugly public divorce, if other free agents started looking at Jordan's organization as a place that doesn't value its cornerstone players, well, that's how valuations drop, fast. Jordan was facing his biggest gamble yet. Does he give in to Butler's demands and set a precedent that players can pressure him into big contracts? Or does he stand firm, risk losing his best player, and potentially watch his franchise's value take a hit that could cost him hundreds of millions of dollars? But wait, there's more, because what happened next is what really confirmed everything. A few days after that explosive press conference, Butler sat down for a longer interview that hadn't been reported by mainstream media yet. And in that conversation, he said the quiet part out loud. "People want to know why this bothers me so much," Butler explained. "It's because I've seen how this works. I've seen how players get used up and spit out when they're no longer convenient. And I've seen how some owners, even ones who are players themselves, forget what it felt like to be on the other side. They forget what it felt like to fight for respect, to prove doubters wrong, to demand fair treatment." He paused, choosing his words carefully. When you play for someone who was the greatest ever, you'd think they'd understand what greatness looks like in others. You'd think they'd recognize the sacrifice, the dedication, the nights where you leave everything on the court. But sometimes, and I mean this with all respect, sometimes becoming an owner changes your perspective. You start seeing players as assets on a balance sheet, instead of as people who've built your brand, filled your arena, and carried your vision. That was it. That was the confirmation everyone was waiting for. Butler wasn't just frustrated about money. He was calling out the fundamental disconnect between Jordan the player, who demanded respect and loyalty from everyone around him, and Jordan the owner, who seemed to be applying a different standard to the players in his organization. The basketball community erupted. Podcasts dedicated entire episodes to dissecting Butler's words. Former players who dealt with ownership issues came forward with their own stories. Charles Barkley said on air, "Jimmy's saying what a lot of guys have felt but were too scared to say." Stephen A. Smith called it one of the most significant player-owner conflicts in modern NBA history. And here's what made it even more explosive. Butler was right. Other stars had quietly expressed frustration with how Jordan ran his organization. There were stories about lowball offers, about players being expected to take discounts because of the honor of playing for MJ's team, about a front office culture that prioritized cost-cutting over championship building. Butler was just the first one brave enough or fed up enough to say it publicly. The $2 billion question became impossible to ignore. Would Jordan bend? Would he risk his reputation, both as an owner and as a legend, by letting this escalate further? Or would Butler actually force the hand of Michael freaking Jordan? As of February 2025, we're in the eye of the storm. The negotiations have stalled completely. Jordan's camp isn't budging on their offer, and Butler's camp has made it clear they're exploring all options. Trade rumors are swirling, even though nobody's officially requested anything. Other teams are circling, knowing that a disgruntled superstar could become available. General managers are making calls, testing the waters, trying to figure out if Jordan would actually be willing to move his franchise player. The fans are split right down the middle. Half of them blame Butler for being ungrateful and causing drama. They point to the opportunity he's been given, the platform he's played on, the legacy he could have been part of. The other half sees Butler as a hero, standing up to billionaire ownership, fighting for fair compensation, refusing to be undervalued just because his boss happens to be Michael Jordan. Social media has become a battlefield. Every Butler highlight gets paired with comments about his situation. Every game he plays gets analyzed through the lens of this conflict. Is he still giving full effort? Is he purposely sabotaging his value? Is this a negotiating tactic or genuine frustration? The speculation is endless. And Jordan? He's been silent publicly, which is somehow more intimidating than if he'd spoken out. Because everyone knows MJ doesn't lose. Not on the court, not in business, not in public battles. His silence feels like the calm before a storm, like he's calculating his next move with the same precision he used to break down defenses. But here's the reality that nobody wants to talk about. Jordan might actually lose this one. Not because Butler is more powerful or more influential, but because the game has changed. Player empowerment is real in 2025. Stars have leverage in ways they never did before. And if this turns into a prolonged, ugly situation, that $2 billion valuation could slip. Ticket sales could drop. Free agents might think twice about signing there. Sponsors could get nervous. Jordan bet that Butler would eventually back down, that the allure of playing for his airness would be enough. But he bet wrong. And now the whole league is watching to see if the greatest player of all time can handle losing off the court. This story matters beyond just Jimmy Butler and Michael Jordan. This is about the evolution of the NBA, about the power dynamics that are shifting right before our eyes. For decades, owners held all the cards. They controlled contracts. They controlled trades. They controlled narratives. Players were expected to be grateful, compliant, and loyal until at the second it was convenient to trade them or cut them loose. But something shifted over the last decade. LeBron changed the game when he took control of his own destiny. Kawhi Leonard sat out until he got what he wanted. Kevin Durant forced his way to Brooklyn. Players realized they had power too. The power of their talent, their brand, their ability to fill arenas and drive ratings. And in 2025, that power is more pronounced than ever. What makes the Butler-Jordan situation so fascinating is the symbolism. Jordan represents the old guard, the era when players had to earn everything and couldn't make demands. Butler represents the new NBA, where stars know their value and refuse to accept anything less. It's a generational clash disguised as a contract dispute. And here's what's really wild. Butler is winning the public relations battle. Younger fans see him as authentic, as someone standing up for himself against a system that would gladly exploit him. They see Jordan as out of touch, as someone who forgot what it was like to fight for respect. That perception matters, especially when it comes to legacy. Jordan spent decades building an image as the ultimate competitor, but now there's a counter-narrative emerging, that he's become the very thing he used to rail against. The financial implications are staggering. If Jordan loses Butler without fair compensation, the team's championship window slams shut. The franchise value could drop by hundreds of millions. Future free agents might avoid signing there. The entire foundation Jordan built could crack. That's not an exaggeration. That's the reality of modern sports business. But if Jordan gives in, if he meets Butler's demands, that sets a precedent. Other players on the roster will want similar treatment. Future stars will know they can pressure Jordan's organization. His reputation as a tough, uncompromising owner takes a hit. It's a lose-lose scenario, all because he underestimated the resolve of a player who's just as stubborn as he once was. So here we are. Jimmy Butler turned on Michael Jordan, not out of disrespect, but out of self-respect. He confirmed what insiders had been whispering for years, that Jordan the owner operates differently than Jordan the player would have wanted to be treated. And now we're watching a $2 billion gamble play out in real time with no clear winner in sight. This isn't just basketball drama. This is history. This is the moment when one of the most fearless players in the league stared down the greatest of all time and said, "I'm not backing down." Whether you agree with Butler or side with Jordan, you can't deny that this matters. This changes conversations. This shifts power. This reminds everyone that legends aren't untouchable and that respect is earned, not inherited. The question now is not whether Butler was right or wrong. The question is, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? We're about to find out. Now, I want to hear from you. Who do you think is right in this situation? Is Jimmy Butler justified in demanding his worth, or should he respect the fact that he's dealing with Michael Jordan? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to stay updated on how this drama unfolds, hit that subscribe button, because trust me, this story is far from over, and you're not going to want to miss what happens next.